This story was told to me by an old grandmother named Marilyn, who still sold silver crosses. She is no longer alive, but even now I am scared when I remember her telling it to me. It happened when Marilyn was a little girl. They had a big family, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. They lived in a township, on the very outskirts of town. To understand what the outskirts were, there was a wide river running behind the vegetable garden, and beyond the river was a big mountain. She said that these places where they lived were famous for not being very good. There were always scary and creepy stories happening there. Many people were afraid and left there. I'll start the story with her words. But before we start the story, I ask you to subscribe to my Underground Scream channel, and don't forget to give this video a like. All right, let's get started. When I was a little girl, my father often went to sanatoriums. He had a hard job, and they gave him vouchers. One day, when he was due back, my mom was getting ready to see him. Having spent the whole day with the cattle, my mother started to prepare dinner in the evening. It was past midnight, and of course we were awake. Suddenly, we heard someone walking down the street and shouting songs at full volume, as if someone were having a wedding. The voices were indistinguishable, and we had no time to realize how many people were approaching. They were crowding toward the hut and shouting loudly. Some were crying loudly, some were laughing loudly, and we were very scared. Even our cows and chickens started running back and forth. We couldn't see who it was or what was going on. It was dark, and the gate was closed. My mom looked out the window, but she didn't see anyone. And voices were approaching our house, stomping on the wooden floor. Then our mother was so frightened that she grabbed a knife, gave us all that was at hand, and herself took an axe and went to the door. Just then, there were voices and loud stomping near our gate, as if they were taking off their shoes and having fun. Mom turned on the light for them. Good thing the light was on in the house, so they were shouting and running so fast that only the stomping and scraping of the gate could be heard. We never realized who it was. My mother never went to bed, waiting for my father. As time went on, more and more terrible things began to happen, and the house shook. In the chicken coop at night, the chickens were flying across the ceiling. They would walk on the roof and bang on it. It was so scary that our father, a stocky, old-school man, was afraid to stay home alone even during the day. We had nowhere to move, and it was scary to stay in the house, so we had to sleep on hay in the barn. But even there, it was not safe. One terrible day, when my brothers and I were returning from school, we saw that our house was on fire. Luckily, my parents were at work. The house ended up burning down. But there was another story that I remembered for the rest of my life, when the house was still intact. I was about 14 years old. I was at a friend's house late one night. He walked me to the beginning of my street, and we said goodbye. I was walking. It was night. The moon was shining, and the street was long. I heard a horse's hooves behind me. I turned around, and there was a horse made of white smoke, like a ghost. It had a head and half a body, but no hind hooves and no tail. And it's standing there, looking at me. My heart almost stopped, and I ran toward the house, and she followed me. I run up to the house, and I don't hear a hoof stomping behind me. I yanked the wicket, but it was closed. I don't remember how I jumped over them out of fear. I look, in our vegetable garden stands this horse. I screamed and wanted to cry, and I started to knock loudly on the door of the house. My father jumped out. At home, I told him all this, and my father, of course, slapped me. And my mother then said that it was a neighbor who can do magic who saw that I was late and decided to teach me a lesson. And I remember this neighbor. She was ugly, with long, loose hair, and she lived a very long time. When she died, all the men broke down her house and burned everything there. That's when I believed she could do it. And like wolves came to us, or maybe not wolves. At night, I don't remember what time of year it was. I remember there was a wild howl that sent shivers down my spine. My father looked out the window to see what was going on, and there were wolves on their hind legs and their front legs on the fence. They surrounded the front garden and howled shrilly through the windows. My father grabbed his rifle, opened the windows, and started shooting. They ran away, of course, but my father told my mom later that they didn't look like wolves. I don't know what they looked like. Anyway, that's how my childhood in the village was.